My name is Stephanie and I'm 28 years old. I never imagined my body would betray me like this. One minute I was presenting quarterly projections to the executive team, the next I was on the floor, fluorescent lights blurring above me. I woke up in the hospital, alone and terrified. The nurses said they'd called my emergency contacts my parents hours ago. As the clock ticked past midnight with still no visitors, I'd nearly given up hope. Then the door burst open, and there stood Caitlin, my younger sister, breathless and worried. Mom and Dad said they were too busy to come. They told me not to bother either. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if this resonates with you at all, please hit that like and subscribe button. Family drama can be incredibly isolating, but knowing others understand might just be the validation we all need to heal. Growing up as the eldest daughter in the Wilson family meant one thing. Perfection was the baseline expectation, not the goal. From kindergarten through college, I was the quintessential perfect daughter. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, first chair violin, volunteer work that looked good on college applications, and never a toe out of line. My parents, Richard and Diana Wilson, cultivated this perfection with the precision of scientists growing bacteria in a petri dish. Dad was a corporate attorney who measured success in billable hours, and Mom was a real estate broker who ranked her worth by commission checks. They weren't physically absent, they attended every recital and award ceremony, but emotionally, they might as well have been ghosts. Their love came with conditions clearly spelled out in an unwritten contract. Achieve, comply, make us proud, or face the silent treatment that could last for days. Stephanie, my mother would say while examining my report card, a 98% in advanced chemistry. What happened to the other 2%? There was never celebration, only critique of what could have been better. This pressure molded me into a workaholic before I even understood what the word meant. By 16, I was sleeping 4 hours a night, fueled by anxiety and the desperate need for parental approval that never quite materialized no matter what I achieved. Then there was Caitlin, my younger sister by 4 years. Where I was structured and disciplined, Caitlin was wild and free-spirited. She dyed her hair purple at 14, skipped class to attend protests, and challenged our parents at every turn. Her report cards were a patchwork of A's in subjects she loved, art, literature, and C's in everything else. She was authentic in a way I never allowed myself to be. Why can't you be more like your sister? My parents would ask her, while simultaneously warning me, don't let Caitlin's rebellion influence you. They pitted us against each other from the beginning. When Caitlin won a regional art competition, my parents barely acknowledged it. When I was accepted to an Ivy League university, they threw a party and forgot to invite Caitlin. The rivalry between us was cultivated by our parents' manipulation, and by the time I left for college, Caitlin and I barely spoke. She saw me as the robotic golden child. I viewed her as the irresponsible troublemaker who made life harder for everyone. The past 5 years have been focused entirely on my career. I'd become a senior financial consultant at Remington Partners, working 60 to 70-hour weeks. My minimal contact with family consisted of obligatory holiday visits and occasional Sunday phone calls that left me emotionally drained for days afterward. 3 months before my collapse, we'd had our last family dinner. Dad had spent the entire meal questioning my choice to postpone a promotion that would have required relocation. I don't understand why you're sabotaging your career trajectory, he said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. By your age, I was already made partner. Richard, my mother chimed in. Stephanie probably turned it down because she's finally thinking about settling down. Aren't you, dear? Caroline's daughter just got engaged to a neurosurgeon. I gripped my fork tighter. I didn't take it because I wanted to complete my current clients' portfolios. It would look unprofessional to abandon them mid-project. Always excuses, Dad muttered. Meanwhile, your biological clock isn't getting any younger. Caitlin, who had been surprisingly invited that evening, rolled her eyes dramatically. For God's sake, let her live her life. She's killing herself for this job already. That was truer than Caitlin knew. The dizzy spells had started a month before. The migraines that left me vomiting in bathroom stalls between meetings, the heart palpitations I blamed on too much coffee. My body had been sending warning signals that I'd expertly ignored, just as I'd been trained to push through any weakness. The dinner ended with my father's pronouncement that I was wasting my potential and my mother's passive-aggressive sighs about grandchildren. I'd left early, Caitlin following me to the door. You look like hell, Steph, she said, genuine concern in her eyes. Thanks for the compliment, I replied coldly, brushing past her. That was the last real conversation we'd had before I collapsed 3 months later, my body finally forcing the break my mind refused to take. The hospital room felt sterile and impersonal, much like my apartment that I hadn't properly lived in for months. Dr. Patel, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, stood at the foot of my bed, reviewing my chart while Caitlin sat awkwardly in the visitor's chair beside me. Miss Wilson, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, Dr. Patel said, looking directly at me. You're experiencing severe adrenal fatigue and showing early signs of heart damage. Your collapse wasn't just from exhaustion. Your body is systematically shutting down from prolonged extreme stress. I tried to sit up straighter, my consultant brain immediately calculating how to minimize the damage. So, some rest and vitamins and I can be back at work by Monday, right? Dr. Patel's expression didn't change. You'll be here for at least 2 weeks for monitoring and initial treatment. After discharge, I'm recommending a minimum 3-month medical leave. No work, no emails, complete rest, and stress reduction. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. I have clients dependent on me, deadlines, quarterly reviews. Stephanie, Dr. Patel interrupted. I'm not making suggestions. If you continue at your current pace, we're looking at potential heart failure before you're 30. Your choice now is between your job and your life. The reality crashed over me like a wave. 3 months. My career trajectory, my clients, my carefully constructed identity, all put on hold. My parents would be furious. She's staying with me during recovery, Caitlin announced, surprising both me and the doctor. I most certainly am not, I replied automatically. My apartment is perfectly fine. Your apartment is a glorified storage unit for your work files, Caitlin countered. When was the last time you even cooked a meal there? Besides, you need someone to keep an eye on you, and I work from home. Dr. Patel nodded approvingly. Having support during recovery would be beneficial. I strongly recommend considering your sister's offer. After the doctor left, I turned to Caitlin. Why are you doing this? We barely speak. Caitlin's expression hardened. Because, unlike our parents, I don't think your only value comes from your productivity. Speaking of which, shouldn't they be here by now? I reached for my phone, ignoring the twinge of hurt. I'll call them again. The call went exactly as I subconsciously expected. Dad answered, his voice distracted. Stephanie, I'm heading into a meeting. Your mother and I got the message about your episode. Honestly, I think you're overreacting to simple exhaustion. Take a day off if you must, but this hospital drama is excessive. I could hear my mother in the background. Ask her if she's spoken to Dr. Levinson's son yet. I gave her his number weeks ago. Dad, the doctor says I need 3 months to recover. I could have had a heart attack. Don't be dramatic, he scoffed. Wilson women don't have heart problems. Your grandmother worked until she was 78. Grandmother died of a heart attack, I said quietly. That was different. Look, I've got to go. Call your office and get things sorted out. You can't afford to show weakness in this economy. The call ended, and I stared at the phone in disbelief. Tears I hadn't allowed myself in years welled up and spilled over. Caitlin gently took the phone from my hand. They've always been like this, Steph. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy trying to please them. They're just concerned about my career. I defended automatically, though my voice lacked conviction. They're concerned about how your episode reflects on them, Caitlin corrected. Just like they were concerned about how my art school phase would look to their country club friends, or how your broken engagement to Bradley Thompson's son was a networking opportunity lost. I stared at her, memories filtering through a new lens. The pressure to date James Thompson despite our complete incompatibility. Dad's business deal with Bradley that followed shortly after. The convenient timing suddenly seemed suspicious. They wouldn't manipulate my personal life for business, I said, but my voice wavered. Caitlin's laugh was hollow. They've been manipulating both of us our entire lives, Steph. You just got the golden handcuffs while I got the black sheep treatment. A hospital social worker named Marisa visited later that afternoon. She gently explored my family dynamics and work habits, her expression growing more concerned with each answer. Stephanie, the patterns you're describing, the perfectionism, the inability to rest without guilt, the feeling that your worth is tied to productivity, these are trauma responses, she explained. Your body is now forcing you to face what your mind has been running from. But my parents provided everything. I protested weekly. Private schools, music lessons, college tuition. Emotional neglect and conditional love can coexist with material privilege, Marisa said kindly. Sometimes the most insidious trauma comes from what wasn't provided: unconditional acceptance, emotional safety, the right to make mistakes. By evening, physical exhaustion won out over mental resistance. As nurses checked my vitals for the night, I turned to Caitlin, who had stubbornly remained by my bedside. Your place, I whispered, just until I'm stronger. But I'll need my own space. Caitlin smiled, the first genuine connection between us in years. I've got a spare room with your name on it, sis. 2 weeks later, Caitlin helped me navigate the 5 flights of stairs to her Brooklyn apartment. My legs shook with the exertion, a humiliating reminder of how weak I'd become. The doctor had discharged me with a medication regimen, strict instructions for rest, and weekly checkups. Sorry about the walk up, Caitlin said, unlocking her door. The rent was too good to pass up. I stepped inside and froze. Caitlin's apartment was the polar opposite of my sleek Manhattan condo. Walls painted teal and burnt orange, mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. Art everywhere. Paintings, sketches, photographs. Plants thrived on every available surface. It was chaotic, vibrant, alive. I know it's not your minimalist aesthetic, Caitlin said, watching my reaction. But the guest room is calmer. I promise. The guest room, as promised, was more subdued cream walls, a comfortable bed with blue linens, and a small desk under the window. Still, artwork adorned the walls, and string lights created a warm glow. You can change anything you want, Caitlin offered, setting down my suitcase. I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed. This woman, this sister who I'd barely spoken to for years, had prepared a space for me. Meanwhile, our parents hadn't even called to check if I was alive. That first night was awkward. I sat stiffly at Caitlin's kitchen table as she cooked vegetarian chili, feeling useless and out of place. So, I ventured. You work from home now? Caitlin nodded, stirring the pot. Freelance graphic design and illustration. I do a lot of work for publishing houses and some tech startups. That's stable? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. She gave me a knowing look. Yes, Stephanie, I make an actual living with art. I'm not the directionless failure mom and dad predicted. I flinched. I never said you were a failure. No, but you thought it, she challenged. You believed everything they said about me, just like you believed everything they said about you. After dinner, Caitlin's friends arrived, a diverse group that included Zach, a music teacher with dreadlocks, Maya, a children's book author, and Devin, a programmer with tattoo sleeves. They brought dessert and board games, their easy laughter filling the apartment. They included me naturally, never commenting on my obvious discomfort or formal speech patterns. They were kind in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable, expecting nothing in return. Later, alone in the guest room, I heard Zach ask Caitlin, "Is she always so uptight?" "She's been programmed to be perfect her whole life," Caitlin responded quietly. "Give her time." Around midnight, unable to sleep, I ventured into the living room to find Caitlin sketching on the couch. "Can't sleep?" she asked without looking up. "My mind won't shut off," I admitted. "I keep thinking about all the work piling up." Caitlin set her sketchbook aside. "Want to talk about it? Really talk, not just exchange pleasantries like we're strangers." Something about the darkness and my exhaustion broke down barriers I'd maintained for years. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I asked. "About how manipulative they were?" Caitlin sighed. "I tried, Steph. When we were teenagers, remember? You said I was just jealous of your success. After that, it seemed pointless." The memory flooded back Caitlin, 16, trying to tell me that our parents were pitting us against each other. My dismissal had been immediate and cruel. "I didn't see it," I whispered. "I thought the pressure was normal. I thought it was love." "It was control," Caitlin said gently. "They controlled you with approval you never quite earned, and they controlled me with disapproval I can never quite escape." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a shoebox. Inside were old family photos and mementos. One picture showed me at my high school graduation standing rigidly in my valedictorian regalia, my smile tight and performative. "Look at your eyes," Caitlin said softly. I saw it then, the emptiness, the exhaustion already evident at 18. Another photo showed Caitlin at her first art show, beaming with genuine pride. In the background, Our parents stood with tight expressions, physically present but emotionally absent. My phone chimed with a text. Mom, have you spoken with Mr. Remington about your return date yet? This extended absence reflects poorly on the family. Not, how are you feeling? Or, are you recovering well? Just concern about appearances and productivity. Something cracked inside me, a hairline fracture in the perfect facade I'd maintained for 28 years. My chest tightened, breath coming in short gasps. The room spun. Steph? Caitlin's voice seemed distant. Stephanie, you're having an anxiety attack. Focus on my voice. She guided me through breathing exercises, her hand steady on my back, until the panic subsided. That's happened before, hasn't it? She asked quietly. I nodded, embarrassed. I usually push through it. Of course you do, she said, not unkindly. You've been pushing through everything your entire life. As dawn broke over Brooklyn, we were still talking, really talking for the first time in our adult lives. Tentatively rebuilding a bridge I hadn't realized I desperately needed. A week into my stay with Caitlin, I realized I needed important documents from my apartment insurance papers, my medical history folder, and some comfortable clothes that weren't the power suits that dominated my closet. I can go with you, Caitlin offered over breakfast. I'm not an invalid, I replied, more sharply than intended. The dependence was still difficult to accept. Sorry, I just need to do some things on my own. Caitlin nodded, understanding. At least take an Uber both ways. No subway. My apartment felt foreign when I entered a museum dedicated to a stranger's life. Everything was immaculate, monochromatic, and utterly impersonal. No photos adorned the walls. No mementos cluttered the surfaces. It was a place to sleep between work shifts, not a home. As I gathered my things, something felt off. Items were slightly displaced from where I always kept them. My desk drawer wasn't fully closed. The throw blanket on the couch was folded differently. Someone had been here. A chill ran through me as I checked my hidden spare key still in its hiding place. Only 3 people had access to my apartment. Me, the building manager, and my parents, for emergencies only. In the bedroom, more signs appeared. My jewelry box was open, though nothing appeared missing. The closet door stood ajar, when I distinctly remembered closing it before leaving for work the day of my collapse. With growing unease, I called my mother. Stephanie, I'm with clients, she answered, irritation evident. Is this urgent? Has anyone been in my apartment while I was hospitalized? I asked directly. A slight pause. Your father and I checked on things naturally. Someone needed to water your plants. I looked around at my plantless apartment. I don't have plants, Mom. Well, we needed to make sure everything was in order, she replied dismissively. Really, Stephanie, you should be grateful we're looking after your affairs while you're playing sick. Playing sick? My voice rose. I was hospitalized for 2 weeks. And now you're lounging at your sister's instead of managing your responsibilities, she countered. We raised you better than this. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with her reminder that they'd sacrificed everything for my success. After hanging up, I continued my inspection with new suspicion. In my home office, the locked file cabinet showed scratch marks around the keyhole. Inside, my financial folders appeared untouched, but when I examined them closely, I noticed the papers had been rearranged, subtle, but unmistakable to someone as organized as me. My stomach dropped when I reached my mail pile. Envelopes had been opened and resealed, not all, but select ones from my bank, investment firm, and workplace. Increasingly disturbed, I dug out an old box from my closet containing childhood memorabilia I'd never been able to discard despite my minimalist tendencies. Inside, I found my high school diary, something I hadn't looked at in years. Random curiosity made me flip through it. On May 17th, I'd written about losing my best friend Rachel suddenly, how she stopped speaking to me without explanation. I'd been devastated, unable to understand what I'd done wrong. The next entry dated a week later. Mom says Rachel's mother told her Rachel felt I was too competitive and made her feel bad about herself. I never meant to do that. Why didn't she just talk to me? Similar entries followed throughout high school and college friendships and relationships that ended abruptly, always with my mother somehow having insider information about why. A sick feeling grew in my stomach as pieces clicked together. I pulled out my phone and, after hesitating, searched for Rachel Hamilton on social media. I found her easily and sent a message explaining who I was and asking if we could talk about what happened senior year. Her response came surprisingly quickly. Stephanie, I've wondered about you for years. I never ended our friendship. Your mother told my mom you needed to focus on college applications and couldn't be distracted by social obligations. I tried calling, but was told you didn't want to speak to me. As I sat stunned in my sterile apartment, more messages from Rachel arrived, revealing a pattern I'd been blind to. My parents had systematically isolated me from friends they deemed distractions from achievement. When I returned to Caitlin's apartment, I was shaking with rage and betrayal. They've been in my apartment, I told her, dropping my bag. And that's not all. I showed her Rachel's messages and the diary entries. Caitlin's face fell. Steph, I knew about some of this. What? I stared at her. In high school, I overheard mom making calls, telling people you were too busy to attend parties or hang out. Later in college, I saw dad screening your calls, telling people you were studying when you were actually home for the weekend. Fury rose in me like a tidal wave. You knew they were sabotaging my relationships and you never told me? I tried. Caitlin's voice rose to match mine. Remember when I warned you about mom calling your freshman roommate? You accused me of being jealous and making things up? The memory returned Caitlin, trying to tell me that mom had called my roommate Emily to report that I'd complained about her messiness. I hadn't complained. Emily had suddenly become cold toward me, and I couldn't understand why. You should have tried harder, I said, my voice breaking. You left me alone with them. You were their perfect project, Steph. You wouldn't have believed me, no matter what I said, Caitlin replied, pain evident in her voice. And then I became their cautionary tale. Don't end up like your sister. How do you think that felt? We faced each other across Caitlin's colorful living room. Years of manipulated rivalry between us. Both victims in different ways. I can't do this right now, I said finally, retreating to the guest room. As I closed the door, I heard Caitlin say quietly, they isolated both of us, Steph, just in different ways. I sat on the bed, surrounded by Caitlin's artwork expressions of freedom. I'd never allowed myself and felt the walls I'd built around my emotions begin to crumble. 3 days of awkward silence followed our argument. Caitlin and I moved around each other carefully, the newfound connection between us frayed but not broken. She respected my need for space while ensuring I took my medications and ate regularly. I was in the middle of a reluctant therapy session via video call, Dr. Patel's requirement for my continued recovery, when the doorbell rang. Through the open window of my room, I heard Caitlin's surprised greeting. Mom? Dad? What are you doing here? I ended my call abruptly, heart racing. They hadn't visited or called during my entire hospital stay or recovery, and now they appeared unannounced. In the living room, my parents looked comically out of place. Dad in his tailored suit, Mom in her designer dress, both wearing expressions of practiced concern as they took in Caitlin's bohemian decor with barely concealed distaste. Stephanie, darling. Mom rushed forward as I appeared, her arms outstretched for an embrace that felt foreign. We've been so worried about you. You have? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Of course, Dad interjected, his executive presence filling the room. We thought it best to give you some recovery time before visiting. Caitlin raised an eyebrow but said nothing, offering to make tea. As she disappeared into the kitchen, Mom's expression changed subtly, her smile becoming fixed. This place is creative, she said, glancing around. Though hardly conducive to proper recovery, have you considered a wellness retreat instead? The Richardson's daughter went to a lovely facility in Arizona after her breakdown. I didn't have a breakdown, I corrected. And I'm recovering fine here. Dad checked his watch impatiently. Caitlin, we'd like some time alone with Stephanie. Family matters to discuss. Caitlin hesitated in the doorway, teapot in hand. It's my apartment, Dad. 15 minutes, he said, with the tone that had always ended discussions in our household. Surprisingly, Caitlin looked to me for confirmation. I nodded slightly, curious about their sudden appearance and apparent concern. Once Caitlin left, shutting her bedroom door, my parents' demeanor changed instantly. This has gone on long enough, Stephanie, Dad said, voice low and intense. Your dramatic timeout is affecting the family reputation. Timeout? I repeated incredulously. I nearly had a heart attack. Don't exaggerate, Mom dismissed with a wave. Dr. Harrington, you remember him from the club, says these burnout diagnoses are just fashionable excuses for stress. Lawrence Remington called your father, Dad continued, leaning forward. Your leave of absence is causing client uncertainty. The Preston account is considering moving to Goldman Sachs. The familiar pressure began building in my chest: responsibility, obligation, guilt, but this time I recognized it for what it was: manipulation. I'm following medical advice, I said, surprised by my steady voice. My health comes first right now. Mom's eyes narrowed. Your career is what comes first. Do you realize what we've invested in you? The connections we've nurtured? The opportunities we've created? We didn't raise you to waste your potential playing house with your sister, Dad added with contempt. 3 months leave? Absurd. You'll return next week, part-time if necessary. And if I don't, I challenged, something new and defiant rising in me. Dad's expression hardened. Then the support stops, all of it. What support? I asked, genuinely confused. I pay my own bills. Your building? Your father pulled strings with the board to get you in, Mom said smugly. Your client list? Half came from our connections. Your reputation in the industry is built on the Wilson name. And financial assistance, Dad added pointedly. Did you think your trust fund investments manage themselves? A cold feeling spread through me. I manage my own finances. The look they exchanged sent alarm bells ringing. We've always guided your financial decisions for your own good, Mom said carefully. You're too emotional to handle money properly. What have you done? I demanded, rising from my chair. Dad stood to match me, his imposing height a familiar intimidation tactic. What any responsible parents would do. We've ensured your resources are protected until you're thinking clearly again. The door to Caitlin's bedroom opened, and she emerged, eyes blazing. Your 15 minutes are up, and I could hear everything anyway. You should leave now. Stay out of this, Caitlin, Mom snapped. This is why we never wanted Stephanie around your influence. You've always encouraged her worst tendencies. What? Like having boundaries? Taking care of herself? Caitlin shot back. She collapsed because of the impossible standards you set. We set high standards because we believe in her potential, Dad argued, his lawyer voice emerging. Unlike you, who was happy to squander your opportunities on paint and rebellion. I watched this familiar pattern with new clarity, the divide and conquer strategy they'd always employed. Caitlin has a successful career doing what she loves, I said quietly, surprising everyone, including myself. She works hard, lives authentically, and still found room to care for me when you couldn't be bothered to visit the hospital. Dad's face reddened. We were busy managing the fallout from your public episode. Do you know how many calls I had to make to keep this quiet? Your mother had to tell the Hendersons you were on a meditation retreat. Heaven forbid anyone know your daughter is human, Caitlin muttered. Mom turned to me, changing tactics with practiced ease. Her eyes softened, voice dropping to the nurturing tone she'd used when I brought home perfect report cards. Sweetheart, we only want what's best for you. This rebellion isn't like you. First, you refused the promotion, then this dramatic health scare, and now living in this. She gestured vaguely at Caitlin's apartment, bohemian situation. Come home with us today. We'll get you proper care. For a moment, the familiar pull of their approval tempted me. The path of least resistance beckoned return to the fold, meet their expectations, regain their conditional love. No, I said the single word like breaking through ice. I'm staying here. I'm following my doctor's orders. And tomorrow, I'm reviewing all my financial accounts to see exactly what guidance you've been providing. Dad's mask of concern disappeared completely. This is exactly why we contacted your office. Your judgment is clearly impaired. I froze. You what? We had to intervene, Mom said defensively. You were making irrational decisions. Lawrence needed to understand the situation. You had no right to contact my workplace. My voice rose with genuine anger. We had every right, Dad countered. As your parents and as stakeholders in your career. Stakeholders? Caitlin echoed incredulously. She's your daughter, not a corporation. Stephanie has always understood her responsibilities to this family, Dad responded coldly. Until recently. Now we find her living with the daughter who chose to reject everything we offered. You mean the daughter who refused to be controlled? Caitlin corrected. Dad turned to me with an ultimatum in his eyes. It's time to choose, Stephanie. Your family legacy, or this alternative lifestyle your sister promotes. In that moment, looking between my parents' expectant faces and Caitlin's supportive presence, I saw with perfect clarity the pattern of my entire life. I choose me, I said simply, and right now that means recovery on my terms. Please leave. If you continue this defiance, Dad warned, there will be consequences. There always are with you, I replied, a lifetime of suppressed truth finally surfacing. Nothing I do will ever be enough unless it serves your agenda. I see that now. Mom gathered her purse, visibly flustered. This is your sister's influence. When you're thinking clearly again, call us. I've never thought more clearly, I said as Caitlin opened the door pointedly. After they left, Caitlin and I stood in silence for a long moment. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner, I finally said. Caitlin's smile was sad but genuine. Better late than never, sis. That night, sleeping was impossible. My parents' threats echoed in my mind, along with the disturbing revelation about their interference in my finances. Yet, beneath the anxiety ran something new, a quiet current of pride in having stood my ground, of having chosen my well-being over their approval for the first time in my life. Number, Part 7, Third Betrayal, Professional Sabotage. The email arrived at 7:42 a.m., almost a week after my parents' visit, from Lawrence Remington himself, CEO of Remington Partners. Stephanie, please call my office to arrange a meeting regarding your status. Urgent. My heart raced as I read it, the old programming immediately kicking in, drop everything, prioritize work, prove your worth. I was halfway to my phone before catching myself, taking a deep breath, and remembering Dr. Patel's warnings about stress triggers. Caitlin found me staring at my laptop screen, frozen in indecision. Bad news? She asked, setting a mug of tea beside me. I showed her the email. My boss wants to meet about my status. After what Mom and Dad said about contacting him, Caitlin's expression hardened. They're trying to force your hand. It's working, I admitted. My entire career is at stake. After discussing options with Caitlin, I arranged a video meeting, rather than going to the office in person, a small act of boundary setting that felt monumental. Lawrence appeared on screen looking grave, joined by Diane from HR and Kenneth from legal, a combination that sent warning signals blaring in my mind. Stephanie, thank you for making yourself available, Lawrence began formally, so different from his usual jovial tone. We need to discuss some concerning developments. Diane took over, her HR-trained neutrality in full effect. We've received information about potential underlying issues affecting your performance and decision-making. Given your sudden leave in the critical accounts you manage, the firm has concerns about stability. What information, I asked, though I already knew. Kenneth cleared his throat. Your father contacted us with concerns about your mental health. He suggested your leave might be related to emotional instability rather than physical health issues. The betrayal, though expected, still burned. My father has no access to my medical information. My leave is documented by multiple physicians for physical health issues brought on by overwork. Of course, Lawrence interjected smoothly, but Richard also mentioned concerning behaviors, impulsive decisions, erratic judgment, emotional outbursts. As your father and a respected colleague in the financial community, we took his input seriously. I struggled to maintain my professional composure. With all due respect, my father is not my physician, nor is he privy to my day-to-day work performance. His concerns are not medically or professionally substantiated. The meeting deteriorated from there. They questioned my commitment to clients, my judgment in taking extended leave during critical market fluctuations, and repeatedly referenced my father's insights into my condition. The final blow came when Lawrence mentioned casually, Richard has generously offered to temporarily oversee your client accounts personally to maintain family continuity. Several clients have already expressed relief at this arrangement. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My father has contacted my clients directly? Lawrence had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Only those with whom he had pre-existing relationships. As a courtesy to them, and to preserve the firm's reputation during your situation, Diane added delicately. After the call ended, I sat motionless, processing the extent of my parents' interference. They hadn't just called my boss, they'd actively undermined my professional reputation, contacted my clients, and positioned themselves to take over the career I'd built. Caitlin found me still at the table, an hour later, now surrounded by paperwork and furiously taking notes. That bad? She asked, sitting beside me. Worse, I replied, my voice tight. They've been systematically undermining me professionally, Dad's positioning himself to take over my client relationships I built over years. I showed her the emails I discovered from clients expressing concerns about my well-being that had all emerged within days of each other using suspiciously similar language. This is orchestrated, Caitlin said, scanning the emails. They're trying to force you back to work by threatening your career. It's working, I admitted. The firm gave me an ultimatum: return next week or face reassessment of my position. Caitlin's expression darkened. They can't do that. You have medical documentation, which is why I called Dr. Patel. I said, a new determination in my voice. She's sending formal medical documentation to HR, and she's filing a complaint about the breach of my medical privacy. She's also referring me to an employment attorney who specializes in medical leave cases. Caitlin looked at me with surprise and newfound respect. That's not the Stephanie I'm used to seeing. I'm not the Stephanie I'm used to being, I replied honestly. The old me would have capitulated immediately, pushed through regardless of health consequences, and apologized for the inconvenience of nearly dying. The next morning, I called an emergency video meeting with my direct team at Remington, bypassing Lawrence entirely. To my surprise, my colleagues expressed shock at the narrative being spread about my leave. We were told you were having serious mental health issues, my assistant Julia confessed. Your father called me personally and suggested we might need to double-check your work from the past few months for errors. Another colleague, Marcus, added, he's been taking meetings with the Preston account saying you'd requested his involvement. Preston's people seemed confused but didn't question it because of the Wilson name. Armed with this information and Dr. Patel's documentation, I requested a formal meeting with Remington's senior partners. During the tense 2-hour video conference, I presented medical documentation, timeline discrepancies, and evidence of my father's unauthorized interference. My leave is legitimate and legally protected, I concluded. Any attempt to terminate my position or reassign my clients without my consent during protected medical leave would constitute grounds for legal action. The senior partners, concerned about potential liability, quickly changed their approach. By the end of the day, I had written confirmation of my secure position and 3-month leave, plus assurances that my clients would be handled according to the transition plan I would provide, not my father's interventions. When I shared the outcome with Caitlin that evening, she raised her tea mug in a toast. To setting boundaries, she said proudly. Never thought I'd see the day. It's terrifying, I admitted. I've spent my entire life avoiding conflict with them. Welcome to the dark side, Caitlin grinned. It's scary as hell at first, but the freedom is worth it. That night, I slept better than I had in years, despite the knowledge that my parents' retaliation was likely just beginning. The unexpected knock came on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks into my stay with Caitlin. I opened the door to find a stylishly dressed woman in her 50s with familiar eyes and a hesitant smile. Stephanie? I'm Jennifer Lawrence, your mother's sister. I stared in confusion. Mom doesn't have a sister. The woman's smile turned sad. That's what Diana has been saying for 20 years, but I assure you, I exist. Caitlin appeared behind me. Can we help you? Jennifer held out a business card. I heard through the grapevine that you're finally breaking free of Richard and Diana's control. I thought you might need an ally who understands exactly what you're up against. Over coffee at Caitlin's kitchen table, Jennifer explained her history, the system my mother had effectively erased from our family narrative after Jennifer refused to follow the prescribed path of marrying strategically and maintaining appropriate social connections. I chose to marry for love, Jennifer explained, turning her wedding band. A music teacher without family connections or inheritance. Diana was furious, said I was destroying the family legacy. When I refused to break off the engagement, I was cut off completely. Your grandfather revised his will, Diana stopped acknowledging my existence, and I became a cautionary tale rather than a family member. Why come forward now? Caitlin asked, understandably suspicious. Caroline Thompson reached out to me, Jennifer replied. We've maintained a secret friendship over the years. She told me about Stephanie's health crisis and how Richard and Diana responded. It sounded painfully familiar. Caroline Thompson? I echoed. James Thompson's mother? Jennifer nodded. Your almost mother-in-law, I believe. She's been concerned about you since you broke off the engagement, said you seemed increasingly unhappy but trapped in your parents' expectations. As Jennifer shared more family history, patterns emerged that mirrored my own experiences, controlling behaviors that spanned generations, financial manipulation as a primary method of control, and systematic isolation of family members who challenge the status quo. There's something you should know about your finances, Jennifer said carefully. It's why I finally decided to contact you directly. She handed me a folder containing legal documents, copies of trust agreements established by my grandparents. You and Caitlin both have trust funds that were supposed to become fully accessible when you turned 25, Jennifer explained. Independent from your parents' control. I stared at the documents in shock. That's impossible. I've only had access to quarterly disbursements, with larger withdrawals requiring parental co-signatures. Dad said that was grandfather's stipulation until I turned 35. It wasn't, Jennifer said firmly. I was there when the trusts were established. Equal amounts for both granddaughters, full control at 25. Diana and Richard somehow maintained control by becoming co-trustees and manipulating the paperwork. Caitlin looked stunned. I was told I had a small trust that was depleted paying for my frivolous art education. Jennifer shook her head sadly. Your trust will be worth approximately $2 million today, as is Stephanie's. Neither of you has ever had proper access to what is legally yours. The revelation sent me into action. With Jennifer's guidance, I contacted the original trust attorney, now retired but willing to provide historical documentation. I discovered my parents had been systematically controlling and monitoring all my finances, not just the trust fund. My independent financial advisor was my father's college roommate. My accountant reported directly to my parents. Even my personal checking account had hidden monitoring through a family office arrangement I'd never fully understood. A visit to my bank revealed the most disturbing betrayal, yet my parents had been accessing my accounts using the power of attorney document I had no recollection of signing. The bank officer showed me the form, dated during my college years, with what appeared to be my signature. I never signed this, I said, examining the document closely. It appears to have been notarized properly, the bank officer noted. By Thomas Williams, I read, recognizing the name. My father's personal assistant. Jennifer helped me connect with a forensic accountant and financial attorney. The preliminary findings were staggering: systematic monitoring of my spending, regular transfers from my accounts to investment vehicles I'd never authorized, and a complex web of financial entanglements designed to maintain parental control while creating the illusion of independence. They've effectively been siphoning funds from your accounts for years, the accountant explained during our consultation. Not stealing outright, but moving money into family-controlled investments where you technically own shares but have no actual control. The financial attorney was blunter. This is financial abuse, Miss Wilson. Sophisticated and well disguised, but abuse nonetheless. As we untangled the financial web, anonymous text messages began appearing on my phone. This investigation is hurting the family. Stop before you regret it. Some doors once open can never be closed. Think carefully. Financial mistakes can follow you forever. Don't burn bridges you'll need later. The implied threats only strengthened my resolve. With Jennifer's guidance and Caitlin's unwavering support, I filed formal complaints with regulatory authorities, changed all my accounts and passwords, and initiated legal proceedings to regain control of my trust. You realize they'll escalate when these become official, Jennifer warned as I signed the legal documents. Diana and Richard don't surrender control willingly. I know, I said, my hands steady for perhaps the first time in my life, but I can't keep living in their cage, no matter how gilded it might be. That night, I received an email notification that my apartment building was terminating my lease due to violations of community standards, the final confirmation that every aspect of my independent life had been secretly controlled by my parents, all along. Number, Part 9, Final Confrontation and Fifth Betrayal. The Thanksgiving invitation arrived via courier, a formal card requesting my presence at the annual Wilson family gathering at my parents' Connecticut estate. After everything that had happened, the pretense of normalcy was almost laughable. You're not actually considering going, are you? Caitlin asked incredulously when I showed her the invitation. I need to face them directly, I explained. In this on my terms, not theirs. Jennifer, who had become a regular presence in our lives over the past weeks, nodded understanding. They're expecting you to avoid confrontation as you always have. Showing up will throw them off balance. I'll go with you, Caitlin offered immediately. We both will, Jennifer added. Diana might disown me twice, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. The three of us arrived together at the imposing colonial house where I'd grown up. From the outside, it looked like a picture-perfect scene. Thanksgiving decorations tastefully arranged, luxury vehicles lining the circular driveway, the glow of warm lights promising family togetherness. Mom opened the door, her practiced smile faltering momentarily at the sight of Jennifer beside me. "Stephanie, you came." And "Caitlin, how?" "Unexpected." Her gaze slid over Jennifer without acknowledgement. "And you've brought a guest." "Hello, Diana," Jennifer said calmly. "It's been 20 years. You look well." Mom's face went through a remarkable series of expressions before settling on icy composure. "Richard," she called over her shoulder, "Stephanie has arrived with company." The gathering was larger than I'd expected. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends filled the formal living room, creating an audience for whatever my parents had planned. Dad emerged from his study, faltering slightly at the sight of the three of us standing together. "Stephanie," he greeted carefully, "we didn't expect you to bring guests." "Family isn't a guest, Dad," I replied pointedly. Conversation around us died as relatives sensed the tension. Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, approached with forced brightness. "Stephanie, darling, we've all been so worried. Richard told us about your unfortunate nervous breakdown." "I didn't have a nervous breakdown," I corrected firmly. "I experienced physical collapse due to chronic overwork. There's a significant difference." "Of course, dear," she patted my arm condescendingly. "Whatever you need to call it, we're all just relieved you're getting help for your issues." I realized then that my parents had been controlling the narrative within the extended family as well, positioning me as mentally unstable rather than physically ill. Dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Mom had arranged the seating to separate me from Caitlin and Jennifer, placing me between cousin William, a psychiatrist, and Uncle George, a hospital administrator. The conversation around me centered conspicuously on mental health resources and the tragedy of untreated psychological conditions. Midway through the main course, Dad stood to make a toast, glass in hand, and patriarchal authority firmly in place. "Family," he began gravely, "is the foundation upon which we build our lives. The Wilson name carries responsibilities and traditions spanning generations. The familiar rhetoric washed over me: family, legacy, responsibility, appearance, reputation, words that had governed my existence for 28 years. Which is why," he continued, his gaze fixing on me, "we sometimes must take difficult actions to protect those we love, even from themselves." Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother and family attorney, stood next. "In light of recent concerns about Stephanie's well-being and judgment, we've prepared some documents we believe are in her best interest." My stomach dropped as Robert produced a folder. "Given the erratic behavior, financial irresponsibility, and concerning medical reports, we're recommending a temporary conservatorship to ensure Stephanie's affairs are properly managed during this difficult time." The room fell silent as Robert placed documents before me, legal papers that would effectively strip me of my autonomy, giving my parents control over my medical, financial, and personal decisions. "We have Dr. Maxwell's statement supporting our concern," Mom added, nodding toward a man I recognized as their friend, not my doctor. "And William has kindly agreed to provide professional oversight." Cousin William nodded solemnly. "The symptoms you've displayed are consistent with acute stress disorder with possible psychotic features. These measures are for your protection, Stephanie." I stared at the papers, then at the family members, watching expectantly, some concerned, others morbidly curious, none willing to question the narrative my parents had crafted. "This is absurd," I finally said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I have not been evaluated by Dr. Maxwell or Cousin William. My actual physicians have documented my condition as physical, not psychological." "Darling," Mom interjected smoothly, "you're not thinking clearly. These outbursts, accusations against your father and me, the financial irregularities, these aren't like you." "Financial irregularities?" I echoed incredulously. "You mean my discovery of the unauthorized access to my accounts, or the misappropriated trust funds?" Dad's expression hardened. "This is exactly the paranoid thinking we're concerned about." I stood slowly, gathering my composure. I brought documentation of my own, medical reports from my actual physicians, bank records showing unauthorized transfers from my accounts, trust documents that were altered to maintain your control past the age stipulated by my grandparents. I removed a flash drive from my purse. Everything is here, including recorded conversations with financial institutions confirming parental interference. Copies have been provided to appropriate authorities and my attorney. The stunned silence was broken by Jennifer's calm voice. I've also provided sworn testimony about the original trust arrangements, as I was present when they were established. This is ridiculous, Dad blustered. Jennifer was removed from family affairs decades ago for good reason. For marrying someone you didn't approve of, I corrected. Just as I'm being labeled unstable for making decisions you can't control, Caitlin stepped beside me, presenting a united front. We've also documented the pattern of isolation and manipulation spanning our entire childhoods, controlling our friendships, relationships, educational choices, and career paths. Uncle Robert examined our documentation with growing discomfort. Richard, if these records are authentic, the conservatorship petition is problematic at best, potentially fraudulent at worst. The family gathering devolved into chaos, some relatives demanding explanations from my parents, others backing away from the conflict, a few approaching me with newfound concern about their own financial arrangements with my father. In a last desperate move, Dad pulled out his final weapon. If you pursue this vindictive campaign, I'll be forced to reveal certain family secrets that would damage all of us, including you, Stephanie. No more secrets, I said firmly. Whatever you're threatening, it can't be worse than living under your control for another day. You've always been weak, he spat, mask finally dropping completely. A disappointment despite everything we invested in you. This theatrical display just confirms it. Mom stepped forward, tears artfully gathering in her eyes. After everything we've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us? By humiliating us in front of the family? I recognized the familiar guilt tactics, but they no longer held power over me. I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it to save myself. With that, Caitlin, Jennifer, and I walked out of the house together, leaving behind the stunned silence of a family system beginning to crumble under the weight of long-hidden truths. As we drove away from the estate, Caitlin reached over and squeezed my hand. You okay? I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror, the perfect facade that had imprisoned me for so long growing smaller with each mile. No, I answered honestly. But I think someday I will be. 6 months after the Thanksgiving confrontation, I stood in the center of my new apartment, a bright, plant-filled space overlooking a quiet Brooklyn street. Unlike my sterile Manhattan condo, this place reflected the person I was becoming. Colorful throw pillows on comfortable furniture, walls adorned with artwork, some by Caitlin, some by artists I discovered myself, and photographs of the people who truly mattered in my life. The journey to this moment had been far from smooth. The legal battles with my parents continued, though with diminishing intensity as evidence mounted against them. The financial recovery was partial but significant. I'd regained control of my accounts and received restitution for the most egregious misappropriations. The original trust had been partially recovered, though some funds were irretrievably lost in my parents' complex financial shell game. My therapy sessions with Dr. Matthews had been transformative, helping me recognize and heal from the emotional abuse that had shaped my life. I learned to identify the inner critical voice that sounded suspiciously like my father and gradually replaced it with one of self-compassion. Weekly sessions had become bi-weekly, then monthly, as I developed healthier coping mechanisms. You've done remarkable work, Dr. Matthews had told me during our last session. Recognizing emotional abuse in high-functioning families is particularly difficult because it often wears the mask of success and achievement. My health has steadily improved as stress reduction became my priority. The heart palpitations had ceased, my blood pressure normalized, and energy returned gradually. I still took medications for anxiety, but the panic attacks that had once been daily occurrences now surfaced only during particularly stressful situations, like the deposition I'd given against my parents 3 months earlier. Professionally, I'd taken a different path than expected. After completing my medical leave, I'd resigned from Remington Partners despite their suddenly accommodating attitude once they realized the potential liability they faced. Instead, I'd accepted a position with a smaller firm that specialized in ethical investment strategies for nonprofits. The salary was lower, but the 40-hour work weeks and supportive culture more than compensated. My relationship with Caitlin had evolved into the genuine sisterhood we'd been denied growing up. We'd moved beyond the pain of our manipulated rivalry to discover authentic connection. Our weekly sister dinners had become a cherished ritual, sometimes serious discussions about our ongoing healing, other times simply enjoying each other's company without the toxic competition that had once defined our relationship. Jennifer had become a beloved aunt and mentor, filling in details of our family history that helped contextualizing the dysfunctional patterns we'd experienced. Her perspective as someone who had broken free decades earlier proved invaluable as we navigated our own paths to independence. Contact with our parents was limited and structured brief, supervised interactions when necessary for legal proceedings, otherwise maintained through attorneys. The extended family had fractured along predictable lines, some relatives cutting ties with us for betraying family loyalty, others quietly reaching out to share similar experiences or offer support. The doorbell interrupted my reflections. Opening it revealed Caitlin, arms full of grocery bags, followed by Jennifer, and an assortment of friends who had become my chosen family, Zach and Maya from Caitlin's circle, Julia, who had quit Remington Partners in solidarity with me, and, surprisingly, Rachel Hamilton, my high school friend with whom I'd reconnected after discovering my parents' interference. "Happy birthday," they chorused, pouring into my apartment with food, wine, and gifts. "We're not too early, are we?" Rachel asked, giving me a warm hug. Caitlin said 7, but I know how you appreciate punctuality. I laughed, genuinely and freely, something that had once been rare, but was becoming delightfully common. "Actually, I was running late today. I got caught up painting." Caitlin's eyebrows shot up. "You? Painting?" I gestured toward the small canvas on my easel, an amateur but heartfelt attempt at capturing the view from my window. Dr. Matthews suggested creative expression as a way to access emotions I've been suppressing. "I'm terrible, but it's surprisingly liberating." "It's not terrible." Caitlin examined the painting with professional interest. "It's authentic. That's what matters." As my friends arranged food and drinks, I watched them with a sense of wonder. These relationships were real, chosen freely, maintained honestly, without manipulation or hidden agendas. The contrast with my former life couldn't have been starker. Over dinner, conversation flowed naturally from serious topics to ridiculous jokes. When Julia asked about the ongoing legal situation with my parents, I found I could discuss it without the crushing anxiety that had once accompanied any mention of family conflict. "The trust fund case will be settled next month," I explained. They finally acknowledged the manipulation of documents, though they're framing it as administrative oversight rather than fraud. Classic Richard and Diana, Jennifer commented wryly, rewriting reality to preserve their self-image. "At least you've recovered some of what was rightfully yours," Rachel noted. "The money matters less than the freedom," I admitted, though I won't pretend it doesn't help make this new life possible. Later, as birthday cake was served, Caitlin raised her glass for a toast. To Stephanie, who survived perfectionism, recognized her worth, and had the courage to build a life on her own terms. And to chosen family, Jennifer added, "the people who love us because of who we are, not despite it." As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a profound sense of peace, not the empty achievement-based validation I'd once mistaken for happiness, but genuine contentment rooted in authenticity and connection. The party continued into the evening, but at one point I stepped onto my small balcony for a moment alone. The Brooklyn skyline glittered against the night sky, so different from the Manhattan view I'd once prized as a status symbol. I thought about the long journey from collapse to reconstruction, how sometimes things need to completely fall apart before they can be rebuilt in a healthier way. The corporate career I'd sacrificed everything for had been replaced by meaningful work with reasonable hours. The superficial social connections maintained for networking purposes had given way to genuine friendships. The constant striving for unattainable perfection had yielded to acceptance of my humanity, complete with flaws and limitations. Caitlin joined me on the balcony, wordlessly handing me a fresh glass of wine. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked after a moment. "I was just thinking about strength," I replied. "How I used to think it meant never showing weakness, never asking for help, pushing through no matter the cost. And now?" I smiled, looking at my sister, the rebellious black sheep, who had actually been the wise one all along. "Now I understand that true strength is having the courage to be vulnerable, to set boundaries even when it's terrifying, to prioritize well-being over achievement." "Look at you, all wise and philosophical," Caitlin teased, but her eyes were warm with pride. "I had good teachers," I said, nodding toward the gathering inside. As we rejoined the party, surrounded by genuine love and acceptance, I realized that my collapse at work hadn't been the disaster it seemed at the time. It had been the first step toward freedom, painful but necessary, like a butterfly breaking free of its chrysalis. The road ahead would still hold challenges: continue healing, establishing healthy patterns, maintaining boundaries against well-practiced manipulation. But for the first time, I was living my life rather than the one scripted for me by others, and that made all the difference. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a major collapse or breakdown? What helped you find your way forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you at all, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to break free from toxic patterns and start again. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes falling apart is the first step to rebuilding something truly authentic and beautiful.